Danny, always be able to turn off the lights. Thanks. There you go. All right. So I'm going to go over this because I do have more worksheets for you to try this on in a bit. So we started with the sine law. Okay, I just want to review that we're not using SOHCAHTOA anymore. Those are called primary trig ratios. SOHCAHTOA only works with right triangles. So I introduced the sine law, right, which also works with, somewhere in here I should have told you that. Oh yeah, here. Sine law also works with right triangles, so now we're going to use sine law to get us going. And remember that sine of the angle, right, will have the side opposite to it underneath it. You always got to remember they stay in pairs like that. Okay? And that the angle is always attached to sine or cosine. Later on we'll do cosine law, right? So you just got to remember that. So I just want to make sure that your notes have the correct answer and also the correct way of showing your work. So I'm going to go over this right now. Okay? So if you look at this example, immediately you should recognize this pair, meaning you have the angle y and side y. This is side y, angle y. You have that pair. That's the one I would always start my equation with. So sine of 132 over the side length, which is 1794.3. You can put meters down, sure. And then you got to take another pair. So let's say you want side z. Well, it goes with angle z, which is right across from it, right? So if you're trying to find this side, then you got to start with sine of 15 degrees on top and then put the letter in there for the side that you're going to solve for, okay? And so in this case, you cross multiply this way and you divide, but that's not good enough in terms of work, okay? You need to actually show me this step here, right? You're multiplying these two, and then you're dividing it by sine of 132, okay? That's the proper way. So 1 mark for setup, 1 mark for the work, and then 1 mark for the correct answer. And so some of you have calculators that are, I call them, you kind of have to do things backwards. Like for sine of 132, for example, you have to go 132 sine, right? You have to do things backwards. So you need to kind of practice with your calculator to make sure you get the same answer as I am. So this gets you 624.91, and we are in meters, right? So you got that around it. And just keep in mind, the largest angle is 132 this here. So this should be the longest side by far, right? You shouldn't get anything that's bigger than 1794, okay? All right, moving on. I'm going to start with this pair again. So sine of 132 over 1794.3. But now I'm going to use a different pair because I'm not interested in z anymore. I'm interested in this pair, angle x and side x, right? But both of them are unknown. So watch what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to say that angle x, this angle up here, is going to be 180 minus the 132 that is given, minus the 15 that is given over here. Okay, and there you get, I'm looking at my notes, 33 degrees is what you should be getting. So this is actually part of the work that you would have to do before you solve for side x, because this 33 is now found, right? You can technically put the 33 in there like that, and now you can find that side x, right? Because you use the angle opposite to it on this side. You still cross multiply and divide, and so x is going to be 1794.3 times sine of 33 degrees divided by sine of 132. Looks very similar to the other side, but you're using sine of 33 here. And that gives you 1315.01 meters. And we're all good because it's still shorter than the longest side. So that concludes. So you basically now solve the triangle, right? You know all angles, all sides by doing that. Can we see back row? Can we see this? Yeah, it's not too small because I'm looking at it from an angle and then closer, so it looks okay. And I know I'm kind of cramming it into a small area, so I apologize. But then again, you should have tried this at least, right? So I'm going to cut it there. And I'm going to attempt my second triangle here. Okay. So do I have a pair? Not always will you have an obvious pair. I'm going to show you that in a bit. But here you have a pair. So I'm going to circle that. You know both, right? That is your starting point. So I'm going to go sine of 61 degrees over 15.9. And that's in centimeters. I'm going to omit that for now. You don't need that. And if you were to want to find side M, you do have the angle across from it, so I would suggest you do that first. Sine of 43 over M. Okay? And then you cross multiply and divide. Okay? And so M is 15.9. I tend to first put the number and then sine of 43. It just prevents there to be an error. Like if you go sine of 43 and then 15.9 right next to it, the calculator might give you an issue there. That's why I tend to do it that way. And so M gets you 12.4. I will go 40 because I'm so used to it, right? For money. 12.40 centimeters. That's M. And it makes sense because 43 is smaller than 61, right? The angle. So the side across from a smaller angle is also shorter. So we're good. Now I'm going to attempt, this is my lowercase l, right? It just hasn't been labeled. But I'm going to start with my known pair. I'm going to start with that. That's how I do it. And it's the safest method. And you need to find angle L. So I'm going to just do that up here. 180 minus 43 minus 61. So you subtract the two known angles. And capital L is 76 degrees. Okay. Which is the largest angle right now. I'm expecting it to be the longest side, okay? So sine of 76 degrees over lowercase l. Okay. You cross multiply and you divide. So it's 15.9 times sine of 76 divided by sine of 61. And that is 17.64, which is what I expected, right? Longest side. If you look at the numbers, right? The three sides, it's the longest side, so we're good. Because I want you to make sure you check, don't blindly trust your answers, right? So there you have those. And this is this example here done similarly. So the 40, right? This is technically side Q, right? So we have a pair again. You know it's going to be sine law every time when you see that. Because later on you're going to have to decide between sine law and cosine law, right? So we start with our pair. I tend to put the sine on top, sine of 40 and then the side, sine of angle and then the side, but you can flip it as long as you keep it consistent. Okay, so in this case, if you wanted P, right, you don't have this angle. So you just on the side here, I'm kind of doing it out of order. I'm going to take away the 34, I'm going to take away the 40. So angle P is 106, which is an obtuse angle, right? Important to me. So I have this now. So I can go ahead and go 106 over side P. And you cross multiply and divide. 36.3 times sine of 106 divided by sine of 40. Sorry, I'm going to scroll up here. Focus my camera a bit. P is equal to 54.29. And we are in centimeters, so my answer will be stated in centimeters. Last but not least, I will start with a pair again. But now I'm going to find r, lowercase r. So sine of the angle across from it, right, 34 is going to give me r. Cross multiply and divide. Sine of 40. R is equal to, did I not calculate r here? I didn't calculate it before, so I'm going to have to do that. 36.3 times sine of 34 divided by sine of 40. That's 31.58. If you round it, right? The 9 bumps that to an 8. So always round to 2 decimals at the end. Okay. I hope this helps. So we now focused on just solving for sides. But what if you need to solve for a missing angle, right? What's happening there? So I'm going to show you that today. And then I will, after doing that, I'll send you to this booklet where you're going to have both, like sides, angles, all mixed up, okay? And then you'll put to the test what you know. Okay. So let's go to 263 here. Okay. And at the top, I'll put down this sine law to solve for angles. Okay, if you want to put that down, sine law to solve for angles, just to have a heading there. All right. So we have this scenario, and they're asking for angles A and C. My game plan is I'm going to find one of the angles, and then I'm going to use sum of triangles equal to 180 to find that third angle, right? Because as soon as I find one more, then I have enough to just subtract it from 180. So I do the same thing as before. I'm like, hey, do I have a pair, an angle and a side across? Yes, I do. And I circle it. That tells me that I have to use sine law, right? First of all. So my setup is going to look like a sine law setup. Cosine law looks very different in terms of setup. You'll see that later on this week. So I'm going to go sine of 81 degrees over 123.2 meters, right, is equal to, which angle can I find based on the information I'm given? Can I find C? The answer is no, because you don't know the side across from it, right? But you are given, let's put lowercase a here. This is lowercase a, this is lowercase c, right? That's how we label a triangle. You use the lowercase letter across. So you know this, so finding angle A is your best way to go. So we do this. Sine, you have to have a letter there as a placeholder for the angle. Sine of that angle, which we're going to find over 91.6. Okay, I'll just make a note. Can't solve for angle C, right? Angle C, comma, since side opposite to it is unknown. That's a big, because if you don't know, if you don't recognize that, right, then you're in trouble, right? So here, this gets a little tricky. This is an added step here when you have a question like this. You remember the inverse? Sine with a little -1. You remember that? You're going to have to use that every time you're trying to find an angle. It's almost like taking the square root, right? You need to do that at the end. It's your last step. So watch this. This is my unknown, so I cross multiply this way and divide going down, right? So multiply, then divide. Okay, that's this is just to help you figure out what needs to be done. So we go sine of A is equal to 91.6 times sine of 81 divided by 123.2. Sure you have that step, right? Not just A, but sine of A. Okay? This needs to be glued together, right? An angle always goes with sine or cosine. Never will you see an angle just sitting by itself in a setup. Let's figure out what this is. Okay, so I'm going to do this. Sine of A is equal to, we'll figure out what this is. So grab your calculator and go 91.6 times sine of 81. I'm going to hit equals right there and then divide it by 123.2. And I'm going to write down at least 4 decimals, 7, 3, 4, 3, and that keeps going, right? This is your last step. Angle A is going to be sine inverse of this 0.7343 dot dot dot. So all of you can do this part that I'm about to show you. I leave this on my screen, right? And then I just go, I have to press shift. You might have a second button. I don't know what it is. So shift, and then I press sine, because above sine, just look up here once, right? If you're not sure, above sine, there is that sine, sine with a -1 there. That's the inverse, okay? So you need to go shift or second or something before you press sine. So I will do this, right? And hit equals. It will take the inverse of the answer that's already on my screen, and it's 47.25 degrees. That's how you find an angle. So if you're not sure about the steps, make sure you have that on your study sheet. So right, we'll do this. On this here, take the sine inverse, right, of answer. Take the sine inverse of answer. That's what is happening there. So you can't just say that A is 0.7343, right? It's the inverse of that, and that's when you round your final answer to 2 decimals. Use sum of triangles equal to 180 to find third angle. Right, so angle C, which they wanted us to find, is going to be 180 minus 81 minus 47.25. And that's 51.75. Question, could you now find side C? Yes, you could, right? Because you have the angle across from it. So you could actually continue this, but I'm going to stop right there because you might get too excited about sine law. I don't want you to overdo it on the first day. All right. So make sure you have this written down. And I always clearly indicate my answer, right? It's easy to see. You just look, circle, or box it in. And also, right, use the angle notation if possible. Okay, right, backside here. I believe I'm going to put a twist on this. I'll say this. Yeah, it says calculate the measure of the indicated side and or angle. Right? So it's either side or angle you're going to have to solve for. So this is now kind of mixing it up a little bit. Okay. What I will do is I'll do one more with you. Okay. If you want to go off on your own, that's fine. But I would say maybe watch one more in terms of steps. I will make it a little shorter than the one I just did. Okay, it'll be maybe one extra line compared to what we normally do. So we have our pair. We know it's sine law. Okay, and I'm gonna start like that. I'm gonna go sine of 121 over 77.5 meters. And I can find angle A no problem. Sine, it's not always going to be A though. Just don't get too used to the letters, okay? Focus on the steps. That means that I have to cross multiply because this is your variable. So we start on the right side with the number. So it's 45 times divide, right? So sine of A is going to be 45.1 times sine of 121 divided by 77.5. And watch what I'm going to do now. Angle A is going to be sine of whatever I get here. I'm already just going straight to this point here. So 45.1 times sine of 121 equals, divided by 77.5. That's 0.4988 and so forth. I'm just going to write down the first couple. And then I state my answer. So I go shift sine equals, and it's 29.92 degrees. Maybe that's very important to note that it's in degrees if you use inverse. How about you find all angles if you have something like this? So it's just as easy as this. To find angle C, you just go 180 minus 121 minus 2992. That's pretty doable. That's 29.08 degrees. Okay. All right, do the other two on your own. See if you can do that before I move on to that worksheet. I need you to at least try these two, okay? You might have to solve for a side as well. So I want you to try that worksheet that I have there. And I just want to point some things out here. So remember, we're still doing sine law. Most likely tomorrow you'll start seeing cosine law. Okay. So again, I have my pair here. That's going to be my starter. And they want this angle, which is easy, right? There's some that are just straightforward, and some you're going to have to think like, oh, I need to do something before that, right? So let's start with that. So sine of 52 over 16.4. And if you need guidance as to how to show your work, make sure you add that to your study sheet, like a complete example of how to do the inverse, because I'm going to be picky on that, okay? So in this case, this is your variable, so you cross multiply and divide like that. So sine of h, make sure you have a letter for the angle, right? Whatever the question is throwing at you. So this is that divided by 16.4. And if you get anything bigger than 1 out of this, you're going to get an error. So because we're using the sine law, I'm going to take the inverse of whatever I get there. So 12.7 times sine of 52 divided by 16.4. And I want that number on there, at least the first couple of digits, right? And so angle H, just take the inverse on your screen just like that, and it's 37.61 because that 5 bumps that to a 1. And you're done, okay? To find angle G, it's just 180 minus 52 minus 37.61. Angle G, that's 90.39, almost a right triangle. Right, that's almost a 90, but it's not quite, okay? So when you're tempted to use SOHCAHTOA, don't, right? Don't use SOHCAHTOA here. All right, the last one, which may have made you think a bit harder, right? But this is a pair. And this is lowercase l, right? Because it's across capital. What should I find first? Because you have a question mark there, you have a question mark there. And the answer is you first have to find angle n, because you have two unknowns here, so you can't even start with that, right? So I'm going to go sine of 81 over 15.3 is equal to sine of m, capital M, over, sorry, my bad, n. I'm finding this angle here. It's n over 6.5. And then you cross multiply and divide like that. So sine of n, not just n, is 6.5 times sine of 81 divided by 15.3. And so angle n will be sine inverse of whatever I get there. So 4 lines, basically, that's all I'm asking you for. So don't be lazy, okay? 0.4196 ... I'm using all decimals. Shift sine 24.81. They did ask for it, so I'm going to circle it. So that's definitely one of the angles that you needed. In order for me to find side M, I need to figure this out. I have 2 angles now, so no problem doing that. I will just go 180 minus the 81 minus the 2481 that I just found, and you end up with an angle that has a decimal. No big deal. 74.19. I'm not going to circle it because it's not part of, they're not asking me for it directly, but it needed to be found. Okay, so now I start again with the pair that I originally found, and now I'm going to use this angle, sine of 74.19, to figure out side M. And so you cross multiply, and finding sides is easier, right? Because you just go M and then just gonna multiply a bunch of things and divide. Okay. And so side M, 15.3 times sine of 74.19, that's 14.90, because the 4 doesn't do anything there. And we are in centimeters, right? That's what they asked me for. So if you want to have like a step, so I did this first, then I did this second, and this was my third step. So I had to make, right, basically 3 different steps to get to this last question mark here. Okay. So you basically solve the triangle in trying to get that one, right? So they're sometimes indirect, they're not direct questions. Okay. Okay, we have 20 minutes. Okay. Tomorrow, yeah, tomorrow I'll see you on this, both sides and angles. So I want you to practice on this worksheet right here. Okay. So work on page 1 to sine law, right? I will give you the answers in a bit. So just start working and then I'll give you the answers. So you just write them down, so you know you're on the right track. There's some word problems